Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's great to be back. I hope you're just as excited as we are. Welcome to the podcast on the Sicha for Project Likutei Sichas. Tonight, we are learning, unpacking, bringing about the Sicha from Chelek Chaf Vav, the 26th volume of Likutei Sichas. The Sicha is on the Parsha of Pekudei, the second Sicha. There's a general discussion about contributing money towards holy things, and we have two items here that are sort of analyzed: the difference between giving money or supporting the Mishkan in general, which is sort of through Moshe, and the impact of that and what that means to us personally, versus supporting, the clothing, the Pekudei Kahuna, as we call it, the clothing of the Kohen, and what that meant and why that wasn't through Moshe, and really reflecting into ourselves what these givings mean, what that relationship feels like and looks like in these different types of experiences. But first, let's take a step back and just sort of understand the setting, what we're talking about. And for that, we will turn to Moshe. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Shmuley. So my job is to draw you into the Sicha. So to try to keep it brief and concise, the main question that the Rebbe asks here is, when Moshe gives a report of the monies that came in for the Mishkan, he counts the gold, the silver, the copper, but does not say what was done with the gold. So he tells us what he did with the silver. They made the adonim, the silver sockets. Why does he not tell us what was done with the gold? And to answer the question in short, the Rebbe explains that the Mishkan, the entire purpose of it was to be an atonement for the sin of the Egel Hazav, of the golden calf. In order for it to work as an atonement, it has to be owned by each Yid. By every single Yid who needed atonement, needed to own the Mishkan. And in order for them to own the Mishkan, Moshe had to, as the Nasi, Hanasi Hu HaKoil, had to take ownership of it as a representative of every single Yid. And the way he did that was by counting and giving a report of what was done, of what was collected, and what was done with it. Now, since the gold, or a big part of the gold, was used in the garments of the kahuna, and the garments of the kahuna are not part of the forgiveness of the Chet HaEgel, of the golden calf, because they're not part of the structure of the Mishkan. They are a detail in the service of the Mishkan, but not in the structure of the Mishkan. Therefore, the gold did not need to be owned by the Yidden, and therefore it did not need to be counted and reported on by Moshe Rabbeinu. That's the first part of the Sicha. The first part of the Sicha, it focuses on the difference between the garments of the Kahuna versus the building of the Mishkan, and specifically those things that were part of the building of the Mishkan needed to be owned by the Yidden, and the way that was done was by Moshe taking ownership of it, which was by counting it and reporting on it. That's the first part of the Sicha.
So to summarize, it sounds like that the accounting, the accounting of the funds sort of created that ownership, that accountability, if you will.
Okay. I think what was done is not as important as why it was done. In other words, there could be a separate discussion as how does Moshe's counting actually take ownership of it. I don't think we're going to focus on that today. I think what's more important is to focus on the fact that the Yidden had to be owners. They had to own the Mishkan. They had to be, in other words, even though everyone donated, but what the finished product had to be something that everyone felt connected to, and it belonged to them. So that way, it could serve its purpose of atoning for what they had done. And then a very important emphasis here is how this is done. That Moshe, besides later in the Sicha, the Rebbe talks about other aspects of Moshe. Before we get to that, the very fact that Moshe is the Nasi, and it says in Rashi, in Chukas, Nasi hader hu kechal hader ki hanasi hu hakoil, that the Nasi is like the entire generation because the Nasi is everything. Thus, when Moshe takes ownership of it, by default, it now belongs to the whole Klal Yisrael. I mean, before we even go anywhere, this takes us straight to Hey Tevis. The Svarim, belonging to the Chassidim, while the Tatat belonging to the Chassidim. So I don't know if you want to go down the Hey Tevis road, but I think there is something to talk about here about the concept of the Nasi Koil, the fact that the Rebbe, the Nasi, the Moshe Rabbeinu is one thing with each and every single Yid, and when he owns something, we own it all. But more importantly, what we do affects him, and what he does affects us.
Can I just wind back for a quick question here, just to analyze this conceptually? So, in other words, that in order for it to be considered fully given from the owners, the Jews, to hektish, to give it as tzedakah, it had to go through to solidify that through Moshe Rabbeinu.
Not in order for it to be fully given, in order for it to be fully received. If I gave a donation, in order for that donation to be as much yours as it is anybody else's, it needed to go through Moshe Rabbeinu. Yes.
It's almost like thinking about a person's assets and all the things that a person acquires, and we certainly have talked about this before, but the assets that a person has and the money and the funds or investments that a person may have, but the tzedakah that he has is what he really has. And that's sort of interconnected here, that that becomes really theirs. Yisrael, you're sitting quiet.
Yeah, Moshe was talking about the fact that the Yidden were taking because they took ownership. I heard something about I want to go back to Moshe on that, about the fact that they were taking ownership on what they did, and the only way that they can really the only way they can really happen is by maybe letting go and giving it to Moshe Rabbeinu. In other words, they were trying to accomplish to give it as a kapara for the avera, but they couldn't. I'm not getting the wording right, but they couldn't do it on their own. They could do it on their own only through giving it up. Giving up what
to become part of the community, to become a communal thing. It had to go through the Nasi. It had to go through Moshe.
Let me say it in other words. If I'm going to get a kapara on something, then I have to invest. It has to be mine, that I am giving it. I'm donating it. I'm involved in it. In order, the fact that my friends Shmuley and Yisrael are doing something that I admire, that I respect, it doesn't change something in me. I have to be in it together with you. So if you're going to donate Kesef Zav and Necheshes, and I'm in my place cheering you on and marveling at what you've done, that hasn't yet affected me. The Mishkan has to become mine in order for me to be able to receive a kapara from it. I have to be involved in it as much as you who donated. So the question becomes, how does your donation and my cheerleading in the background, how does that affect me? So there's something that connects both of us and everything that we own and everything that we are, and that's the Rebbe. So the Rebbe takes obviously has to be, let's say you donate something, but how does your donation affect me? Because when it's given to the Rebbe, then it becomes the possession of Klal Yisrael. Then the Mishkan that gets built from that is now not just your Mishkan because you donated. You put in $1 million, I put in $5. So it's yours more than it's mine. It's not. Maybe your plaque will be bigger. But in sense of ownership, once you gave it away to the Rebbe and you said, Rebbe, do with it what you want, the Rebbe builds a Mishkan for every single Yid. And every single Yid gets the kapara.
It sounds like to me that if you're talking about, really, you have to sort of backtrack a second, like Yisrael you were doing, is that what's actually happening here, right? Happening here is a kapara. And really what like you're saying, very good. Just to sort of summarize the way I understand it, at least, is that it's easy to give, it's easy to make a check, it's easy to, but how does it become a kapara? And how do you become part of that? So long as you are approaching this with your own dollar amount, with your own plaque size, with your own you know what you're bringing to the table. You're an individual. How could this work? How could it ever work? It can't work. And in order for it to be something, in order for it to actually be real and take place and mesh together, you need to be out of the picture. I need to be out of the picture, because if it's about me, it just not, it can't be. There's too many of us in the room. There's not enough space. So the process has to be that we all need to retract. Not what we're giving, but we need to pull ourselves away from the picture so that we have that commonality, like you said, that we could stand together without us blocking each other, and that's the idea of Moshe Rabbeinu, that we're submitting ourselves that facilitates community, that facilitates taking away that the arrogance, or whatever may be, that we could actually step into repentance, step into kapara, in a way that we lose ourselves, because that's really what it's about. You have to lose yourself. If you're walking into a situation where you did something, you wronged someone, here the Eibishter, and you still look at the check I'm writing for you, it can't work. So you need a Rebbe who flattens all that, and now you can maybe start approaching, and you could come, you start getting involved. And this is the idea of Moshe Rabbeinu, that he made us into a community. He gave us opportunity to let go of ourselves, and I'll use the classic cliche words, be vulnerable, or let go, or and bring what you have to the table, but not your arrogance, not your, anyway, just a breakdown of process a little bit, maybe.
I mean, just as in a practical way, you have two different types of people who give tzedakah. You have people who give tzedakah, and they get in the way, you know, and people who give tzedakah and they very much get out of the way, and their tzedakah is mitan emes, you know what I mean? It's like giving it, and it's like it's not going to complicate it. And there, anyway, it's a different
It,
it's a different way.
it wouldn't be fair not to mention, there's a very interesting footnote 19, which just really just shout out at me when we're talking about this, and I think it dovetails right into what we're talking about. The idea here we're talking about is these donations are coming from men, women, and children. And the idea here that the Rebbe brings from Maimer Azal, that a katan koinev eine makna, a child could acquire something. You give the child a prize, a candy, a toy, or whatever it is. A katan, oh, so excited, it's mine. But then, we all have these experiences where you tell your kid you have to share your toy with your friend, or you have to give this, or you have to give. So do they have that ability to give it away? And I think this is such a beautiful analogy for what we're trying to wrap our heads around. The idea of a katan is selfish. It's an undeveloped mind. It's a child. That's what a child is. So a child, to be true, to be able to take what's theirs, or what's been given to them, their toy, their car, their playthings, their ball, whatever it is, and give it to their friend in a full heart of giving, it's a very difficult thing to do. How could a child do that? How could they have a candy and give it? You could tell them to give it, you can make them give it, you could, whatever, but within the nature of a child, it goes against the nature of a child, because the nature of a child is, the animal soul is dominant, not the godly soul. So that's what we're talking about. We're a katan. We can't give away. You know who I am? Do you know who just wrote you a check? Do you know what I mean? I can't just let go. I can't just be anonymous. I can't just be, hidden. And the Rebbe says that the katan could do it through Moshe Rabbeinu. And Moshe could help the katan. Maybe we're the katan, It's an interesting idea there.
Beautiful, actually. I think it's beautiful.
If you're mentioning Ha'ara 19, there's another vart at the end of the Ha'ara, and that is that, and I'm putting it in my own words, but there's a halacha that if a person donates to tzedakah, it becomes becomes the property of Hektish or the property of the shul or the Moisid. So technically, why do you need Moshe Rabbeinu? And the Rebbe discusses that also later in the Sicha. But in Ha'ara 19, the Rebbe makes the point that today that we're already a tzibur. So yes, a person can donate to the tzibur, to the community, and the money belongs to the community. But when did it happen? When did this concept become that there is that we all one, that we are a tzibur? When like there has to be a point in time when all of us as individuals actually became a tzibur. And the Rebbe in R19 says that this is when it happened. When the Yidden built the Mishkan, Moshe created the concept of tzibur, which is to me a fascinating concept. Because but even though we say Chassidim and Mishpacha and Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh Lazeh, and there is a sense of responsibility and connection, but there had to be a point in time when that started. Now, Matan Torah, you would think, Matan Torah, the Rebbe says that Moshe was mechadish the inyan hatzibur. That Moshe created the hisachtos of a tzibur, that now the fact that you and I are brothers, the fact that you and I are connected was what began when the Yidden built the Mishkan and Moshe created this unity, which is a very, very beautiful a concept that ties into everything we're saying. Yes.
Maybe
on our own, we're children.
Right.
Maybe took a bunch of little children and he made us into potential adults.
Maybe just a dovetail into another piece of the Sicha is how there's a part later. I mean, if you want to just give a little intro there, how Moshe was not involved in any way, even by association, by affiliation, because he wasn't present at the time of the golden calf of the Egel, and because of that, that made him an unbiased party to the whole story, and just interconnecting it to what you're just saying, Moshe. It's interesting because we're talking about the lack of self and the lack of bias and the lack of involvement, the lack of participation, and being really removed emotionally, or in any way from the circumstance to be fully focused on what needs to be done here. And it's interesting that Moshe did that, and we're talking about Moshe was uninvolved in the whole circumstance of needing this kapara, of needing anything. So therefore, his bias and his like his connection to this story is very very true, and therefore it almost is very unique how he had nothing to do with it. He wasn't even present. And that's exactly what we're talking about. That is the theme of what's actually happening here: is the removal of our presence, the removal of our engagement in the Egel, the removal of that entire story. And anybody who was there by association, or whether they were actively involved or passively involved, or part of the story, or they're around the corner when the story happened, but somehow, some way, their cousin was involved, their friend was involved. There's something. There's a connection, and that's it. And therefore, there's a bias, and therefore there's me, and there's a story, and it all comes together. But in order to facilitate this type of truth, this type of essential community that's higher than our own individualism, it has to come from something true and something higher, which is the nitzchis, the truth of Moshe, something very, very deep that's beyond the experience that everybody just experienced. I'm just babbling, but it's sort of all starting to piece together.
I mean, in general, I just think on a very practical way, whenever someone's not involved in something, it's always easier to bring it all together. Like many times when we're involved in drama, so we get all the other people involved in the drama to fix the drama, and that creates more drama. And sometimes to have real humility is to go to somebody who is totally out of the picture, to mashpia, somebody's like totally removed from the situation, and to really get, the real advice. Let's just say, practically speaking, in our life, it works much healthier, but it takes a lot more humility, because the teva b'nei adam is to make the cycle work and to see anybody who's involved in the situation. How can we make the drama stronger? But definitely from a Moshe Rabbeinu perspective, who's purely unbiased, because Moshe Rabbeinu sees us in our truest essence of who we are as Klal Yisrael. I think that's very nice. Yeah, that a very nice idea that Moshe has the ability to really bring us together. Because all machlokes and all anything that goes opposite of tzibur comes from a place of ego, and Moshe Rabbeinu sees us from our truest self. I'm ready to move on to Oizvav whenever you are. I don't know if you guys are, but I'm ready to me. I've been waiting quietly over here, really to move on. But I'm respectfully allowing you to bring more about this.
So, in summation, and we'll go to Ezvav, but there is a couple of points that were made. Number one, the idea that we have to be involved in whatever it is, invested in whatever it is, to realize where we're holding and that we need kapara. And the way we do so is through Moshe Rabbeinu, who is able to, in Shmuli's words, very, very beautifully said, to elevate us outside of our klein kinderschaft, outside of our immaturity, and which causes strife and conflict, and bring us to a place where we could become one, and we could rise outside of ourselves, so that we could be able to be true to ourselves, and all that is b'koich of Moshe Rabbeinu. So that sort of is the first part of the Sicha, and then that leads us to the second part of the Sicha, where the Rebbe introduces another touch of the word Pekudei. Yisro.
No, before that, the Rebbe speaks about in Oizvav, about the fact that Ma'aseh de Moshe is nitzchim.
Okay.
And that's good at the end if we get a chance to that. The idea that it's specifically the Mishkan. There's another Sicha in Chelek Tezan, the Rebbe speaks about this as well. That the Mishkan was forever, and the base of Migdash actually got destroyed, and the Mishkan was buried, and therefore it stays forever. And that happens because it happened through Moshe Rabbeinu, and everything that Moshe Rabbeinu touches is nitzchis forever. This is just a beautiful, beautiful thing. We would be that we don't have Fabringen on that famous Sicha of the Ksaviyad of the Rebbe and Chelek Tezayin, also related to the Egel. That Rashi Sicha, where the Rebbe speaks about Erev Rav, and how the Erev Rav, the Rebbe basically points out, according to Rashi, were the only ones who were not killed and survived the Egel, the punishment, and the Yidden were punished. And the Rebbe at the end asked, but why? Did the Erev Rav cause the whole thing? And the Rebbe writes over there, because Ma'aseh de Moshe is nitzchim, and since Erev Rav Moshe Rabbeinu's people, therefore they're there forever. And when you learn that concept, first from the Erev Rav, I know it's not about the Sicha. It's like if the Rebbe didn't give up hope on the Erev Rav, uplifted them, how much more so we can be uplifted, and how much more so we who are Chassidim and just people in general are trying to be connected to the Rebbe. And Ma'aseh de Moshe Nitzchim is a very powerful thing. And in that Sicha, the Rebbe says that Moshe Rabbeinu is the Eved Hashem, Kol Moshe Eved Kana Eved Kana Rabbi, and therefore everything really belongs to Hashem. And once Moshe has it, once Moshe touches it, it's there forever. It's not going away. It's a very comforting, a very uplifting message of just that never to give up hope on ourselves, on how down we are, that we're nitzchi, and we have this great schos to be connected to Moshe Rabbeinu, and to realize that it's just a very powerful thing to me. This whole concept that everybody's in this Sicha and that Sicha and the Chelek Tezayin, the difference in Beis Hamikdash and the Mishkan. And yeah, the Kedusha Lizazim and Kaima. We know these ideas. We know these concepts, but like once you're in all the way. We could bring a lot about this.
It's interesting you bring this up. Quite some time ago, I brought a group of teens to the Rebbe. We were up at the Oyel, and we were in 770, and I was giving them an impromptu tour of 770, and we were standing in the front of the shul downstairs and looking at the Rebbe's the place where the Rebbe davens, and like I wanted to give them a feeling of connection, like not just spiritual. So I told them what it says in the Sichas, that the Rebbe Rashab had sich gewalgert auf die Eholim, that he spent a lot of time at the oil of his father, the Rebbe Marash, and the Zayda, the Rebbe Rashab, Zayda the Tzemach Tzedek, to uskleiben the neshamas from Teim Chetmim, to choose which neshamas would have the schus of being part of Teim Chetmim. So I said to these kids, they were 14, 15 years old, I said the fact that you're connected to a Chabad house is not just because it happens to be that you needed a bar mitzvah. It's because, excuse me, it's because the Rebbe chose your neshama to be out of the whole Eitzah neshamas, that it should be connected with the Beis Chabad. Now, ultimately, every neshama it is connected or is going to be connected with the Beis Chabad, and that's the Geula. But the fact that you're here is because at some point in time your neshama was chosen by the Rebbe that it should be part of this and this Beis Chabad, which is, I think, the point you're making, that every single one of us, by one way or another way, who we have been drawn in by the Rebbe's kindness, by the Rebbe's foresight, and by the Rebbe's love for every single Yid, and he drew us in. We can't hang up our hat and say, I had enough, or chas v'shalom, even to say the words. And certainly we should never question, where we fit in, because the Maaseh de Moshe are nitzchi, and that's a very, very beautiful. I didn't even. Thank you for bringing that part up, Yisrael.
I think you could just add to the nitzchis. Nitzchis means everlasting, and really the whole theme of what we're talking about is truth.
Yeah.
And the opposite of truth. What's that?
Emes is nitzchi. That's
yeah. Emes doesn't say the opposite of truth is arrogance and yeshus and materialism and self. So it's all the same theme. Whether it's a theme of kapara, of atonement, or whether it's a theme of connecting to truth and connecting to connecting to Moshe Rabbeinu, connecting to the Rebbe. It's the same. I think that the message is beyond time. It's also in scope. And if we're talking about a message for everybody, we're talking about a realization that the truth of Moshe Rabbeinu, the truth of community, the truth of that which exists beyond our personal materialism, success, life, money, and everything we do, is wide enough and big enough for everybody. There is no place or person or circumstance that can't touch the truth. The very concept and definition of objective truth means that it's not limited to time, place, or person. And this is something that we can't relate to, something that we can't touch, something that we can't really engage with. And that's why we get caught up in materialism and all these other things and end up with an ego. But I think the big story here is for us all to ask ourselves, how can we touch that truth, in our own way, in the width of it, in the linear story, not just in the story of time. So the story of time I think is one part of the story, but the story of experience is another part of the story, because everybody has a way that they could touch that truth. And there's a famous saying, and I can't remember where it comes from, but the greater the truth, the less limitations it knows. So it's for everybody's taking. So everybody should ask themselves, what is our connection to, what is my connection to that truth? How do I step out of myself? How do I find atonement? How do I step away from the drama? How do I connect to that true point? And for each person it's different, but for each person it's possible.
Yeah, I mean, it's beautiful. I just want to say that part of that nitzchis of Moshe Rabbeinu is the tzibur, the fact that there's a Klal Yisrael, and unfortunately, sometimes there's tremendous machlokes in Klal Yisrael, tremendous division in Klal Yisrael, and we experience that in all sorts of ways, and on a global level, I'm referring to, and ultimately, the thing that will win will be the tzibur of Klal Yisrael, because that's the nitzchis that Moshe Rabbeinu touched and will forever be there. And there was no greater person in our generation that believed in that nitzchias and believed in that foreverness of Am Yisrael and the Klal Yisrael and the Tzibur and the quality of Achdus and the Rebbe, who literally, believed in people in a way that's unimaginable. The Erev Rav, and there was nothing, there was nobody, to the most radical perspective.
Wait,
And
so we can't
also,
fight with people? We can't fight with people anymore? Is that what this is all about?
we could try, but it's not MS. Like you said, it could no. There is fights.
That's I think that's an awakening to say, what is it? What is it? We have to ask ourselves. Moshe, why don't you help us wrap it up for the evening?
Do we have time to talk about Pekudei Milos and Lifkoid?
Why don't you
You take it away.
take it away?
Okay, so once we understand the role Moshe Rabbeinu is playing here, that he's taking the Yid, he's elevating the Yid to a place, as Shmuley said, to a place of emes, that he's taking the Gashmias of the Mishkan. So the Rebbe adds another word over here, that the word Lifkudei, the word Pekudei, is from the word intimacy, or from the word connection, oneness. And the Rebbe says, how does the word numbers, which seems to be a very, very basic element of something, connect with the word intimacy, which seems to be something very, very personal and deep? And the Rebbe answers and says that that the way you lift up the most basic element of the person is by reaching into the depth of that person. And sometimes, specifically because there's a weakness, that weakness creates an opening for the person to uncover the depth that he is capable of. I actually spoke about this earlier in the week, and I said that when people are looking to get married, and they're looking for their spouse, and they're looking for the perfect person, said if the person is perfect, then he doesn't need you. It's only because there may be an imperfection there that you, the potential spouse, will be able to complement that for them, and they for you. And this is the deeper pshat of Pekudei, that it's because we may be an Erev Rav, because we sinned with a Chata Egel, because we are looking at ourselves at a very low, at our lowest. It is that is the opening that could bring us to through Moshe Rabbeinu to our highest, to our greatest point, to the part of us that is emes and that is nitzchi and that is true. And I find it extremely fascinating because you always like to have like an aha moment, and the fact that Pekudei has a whole third meaning that doesn't get touched by the Mefarshim, and the fact that it fits in so perfectly into the conversation of the Sicha, and even into our podcast. It's just so perfect that these two aspects, the Pashat Yid, or the Yid, the imperfect Yid, or the Yid is struggling with themselves. Who am I? Where do I belong? Comes the Rebbe, lifts him up, and says, "You're emes, and you're nitzchi, and you and fakert." Utilize that humility, utilize that weakness to rise to your greatest heights, to a point of intimacy with Hashem, to a point of intimacy with your own neshama, and recognize how powerful you are and how much kaiches Moshe Rabbeinu gives us to be able to recognize our own potential and to rise beyond.
I just have to end that this is the sixth Sicha that we've learned in Project of the Sichas. To this cycle, sixth Sicha on the Pekudei. Clearly, there's someone who has not once the Rebbe's Torah on one pasuk in Torah. There's six Sichas, incredible Sichas that you can just so far. Could be there's even more coming. So there's a lot to learn, and these new pshatim keep coming, and so much to fabring about. Anyway, thank you guys for making the Sicha alive as always.
All right, have a good night, everybody. Shkach.